Hi guys, Matt Easton here. So previously I have shown you this Indian basket hilted sword that we could perhaps call a Susan Pata. There are various possible different names that could be applied to this. Interestingly, if you look in books that include Indian swords, you'll notice that swords sometimes have completely different names, even though they might be of a similar type. This type of hilt, this so-called Hindu or Indian basket hilt, is often found on kanda. Kanda is a very specific type of sword, and this isn't really a kanda, although some books might call this a kanda. But really what I want to say in this video is that some people have expressed surprise that some Indian swords had European blades. And this is a fact. In actual fact, you find European blades on tulwars, on curved tulwars, as well as straight blades on these type of basket hilts. This is an Indian blade, incidentally, and really I suppose the thing to say is that India imported and exported a huge amount of things all across the world. India produced a lot of the actual billets of steel that were used for so-called Damascus or Wootz steel that was produced in Syria and other parts of the Middle East, most famously in Damascus, of course. And in actual fact, the steel, as I mentioned, the steel for Damascus sword blades actually came from India. They had a particular way of producing crucible steel that gives a certain pattern, almost like little raindrops, sometimes known as watered steel, little raindrops sort of surface on it that's kind of, it's not pattern welded, it is crucible formed steel, and this is very characteristic of Wootz or Damascus sword blades, and it came from India. But equally, India imported a lot of things as well. It imported a lot of firearms, gun barrels and such like from Europe, and another thing it imported was sword blades. Why did they import sword blades? Well, quite simply because Europe, certainly by the 18th century and to a certain degree the 17th century, was really good at mass producing things. And whilst sword blades were of excellent quality in India, they were quite labour intensive to make. And the cheap sword blades in India were not as good as the cheap European sword blades. And in actual fact, you know, there were a variety of qualities of sword blades coming out of Europe and being exported all over the world. A lot of, for example, Polish and Hungarian sabres actually have German-made blades on them. And equally, lots of Indian sabres, i.e. tulwars, have mostly German-made blades on. And what I have in my other hand here is an example of such. I haven't shown this one in video before. Again, you will see it's the Hindu basket style hilt, and the blade on this is a backsword blade. That is, it's a single-edged blade with a fuller near the back. So just as a comparison, I'll hold this sword up against the other one. You can see that the one in my left hand, the European bladed one at the bottom here, is absolutely immense. I'm just going to put the Indian one down so I can switch hands because I'm predominantly right-handed. This blade is absolutely huge. It's a massive cavalry backsword blade. It's 40 inches long from the base of the blade here to the point, and it is really, really big, although it's quite flexible and relatively light actually. The whole weapon only weighs about 3 pounds, so it's not light, but it's not heavy either. And it's a huge huge blade on it, very, very sharp, been sharpened very, very well in India, I would imagine. But what's the complete giveaway? I mean, I would have looked at this and said this was a European blade purely from the form of it. Incidentally, this is often known in books and in India as Firangi or Firangi, which means foreign, essentially. So in actual fact, a lot of books describe a type of sword that usually looks like this as a Firangi. I'm not really sure that they were ever historically known as that in the 19th century or earlier, because that word simply means foreign. And whilst, yes, this is a foreign blade, there were other types of foreign blade. You could call a tulwar with a German blade on it a Firangi equally, okay? So I'm not sure what these were actually called specifically in period. But the complete giveaway, apart from the fact that this looks like a European backsword blade, is, I don't know if you'll be able to see this in the light, but just around here are some letters, and they actually disappear under the langets because these blades were made in Germany to be mounted mostly on basket hilted hilts. And actually what you've got there is Lingen. Now Lingen is very clearly the end of the word Solingen, and Solingen is the most famous centre even today for producing blades, knives and swords and everything, every other type of blade. It's really kind of the German Sheffield or Birmingham. In the 18th, 19th centuries in England, really Birmingham was the most famous production centre for gun barrels and sword blades. In the late 19th century, Sheffield became very famous for making knives and cutlery, and then in the 20th century, Sheffield became kind of like the kind of really famous centre for making anything of steel, essentially. But in the 19th century, it was more Birmingham. In Germany, it was Solingen. There were other parts of Germany that made sword blades and gun barrels and such like, but Solingen was really famous for knives and swords. So this is a Solingen German backsword blade, 40-inch blade, massive great thing, although not particularly heavy, mounted on an Indian Kandar type hilt, basket hilt. So there we go. Really to say that, you know, Indian swords did often have European blades. The reason why they had European blades was probably because they could export things and get them in return, and so economically it worked out in their favour. The European blades were of homogeneous carbon steel, spring steel. They were pretty good quality. They weren't the best quality. There are actually, you could debate that the best quality Indian swords were better quality, but they were incredibly labour intensive to make. And so if you wanted kind of standard quality, average quality, good, reliable sword blades of known temper, known steel quality, then importing them from Germany, even in the 17th and 18th centuries, was obviously made economic sense in India. So the Indians did use both European blades and native-made Indian blades as well. So there we go. Lots of Indian swords have European blades, usually German and usually Solingen, much like this one. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys.